A woman can chair the board of a children's hospital and still be afraid to walk through its front doors. The November air in Halifax came off the harbor like a blade. Gwen Mackenzie stood in the parking lot of the IWK Health Center, with her coat buttoned wrong and her breath clouding in the dark, and she did not move toward the entrance. She never did. She stood the way she had stood every Thursday evening for 14 months, close enough to see the lit windows on the pediatric ward, far enough that no one inside would see her face. At 47, Gwen ran one of the largest children's health foundations in Atlantic Canada. She had raised $11 million in the past fiscal year alone. Her name was on the wall of the cardiac wing. She had shaken the hands of premiers, sat beside federal ministers at fundraising dinners, and written checks large enough to fund new surgical suites. People called her tireless. People called her dedicated. They did not know she had not been inside this hospital since the night Paul died. Her husband, Paul Mackenzie, had collapsed in this same parking lot 14 months ago. Massive cardiac event. He had been dropping off a donation check on her behalf, because she was at a conference in Toronto and could not get back until the next morning. By then there was nothing left to come back for. He was 49 years old and had never been sick a day in his life, and the last words he had said to her over the phone were, "I love you, don't worry. I'll just be 5 minutes." She had been 3 months pregnant when they buried him. She lost the baby 2 weeks after the funeral. The doctor said it was stress. Gwen did not ask for more information than that. She had stopped asking for information about things she could not change. Since then, the house on Jubilee Road had developed its own kind of silence. Not peaceful quiet, the wrong kind. The kind that pressed against the walls. She kept Paul's mug on the counter, his coat on the hook by the door, his reading glasses folded on the nightstand on his side of the bed as though he had only stepped out for a moment. His last voicemail was still saved on her phone. She listened to it on hard nights. "I love you, don't worry, I'll just be 5 minutes." The foundation kept her moving. Meetings, galas, grant reviews, hospital visits that she now conducted by phone or sent her deputy to handle in person. No one had pushed her on it. They understood, they said. They gave her space. What they did not understand was that space had become her entire life. Gwen walked to the low concrete wall at the edge of the parking lot and sat down. This was her Thursday ritual. Drive to the hospital, park, sit close enough to see the lit windows, then drive home. She did not know what she was waiting for. Some nights she thought she was waiting for the courage to go inside. Other nights she suspected she was waiting for permission to still be broken. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket. Paul's contact was still at the top of her favorites. She was never going to delete it. The cold reached through her coat sleeve. The harbor wind pushed a candy wrapper across the pavement. The automatic doors of the hospital slid open and closed as people moved through them. Nurses, families, a paramedic pushing an empty gurney, and none of them looked at the woman sitting alone on the wall in the dark. Then she heard footsteps. Small ones, careful on the wet pavement. She turned. A boy stood a few meters away, hands shoved into the front pocket of a thin zip-up hoodie that was not warm enough for November. He was around 9 or 10 years old, slight, with brown hair pushed sideways by the wind and mud at the knees of his jeans. He was holding something small and flat against his chest. The way people hold things they are afraid to lose. He was watching her with the direct, unembarrassed attention that only children manage without seeming rude. "You're crying," he said, not accusing, just reporting. Gwen reached up and found that she was. She had not noticed. "I suppose I am," she said. He nodded seriously. "My dad says hospitals make everybody cry eventually. He says it means you care about someone." Gwen studied the boy. He was alone, no adult nearby, no parent stepping out of a car, no one calling his name from the entrance. "What are you doing out here?" she asked. "Waiting." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "They took my dad inside a couple hours ago. The people at emergency said I had to stay in the waiting room, but it's really loud in there and I couldn't think." "Is someone with your father?" "The doctors." He said it plainly as if that answered everything, because to him it probably did. Gwen looked at the entrance. The sliding doors opened again. A couple in winter coats, the woman crying quietly against the man's shoulder. "How long have you been out here?" she asked. The boy looked at the sky as though he might find the answer there. "A while." "Are you cold?" "A little." It was at least 5 degrees below zero with the wind off the water. His hoodie had a small hole at the elbow. Gwen stood from the wall. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Ellie Turcotte." "I'm Gwen." She looked at him, the thin hoodie, the careful way he held whatever was pressed against his chest, the mud on his jeans. "There's a cafeteria inside. Would you let me buy you something warm while you wait?" He looked at the entrance, then back at her. The same careful weighing she had seen in the eyes of children at foundation events when a stranger offered something. Not distrust exactly. More like the habit of thinking before accepting. My dad told me not to go anywhere with people I don't know, he said. He's right, Gwen said. And then, because she had learned that honesty worked better than reassurance with children who had already had to be careful. We don't have to go anywhere. I can go in and bring something out to you. Eli looked at her for a long moment. How come you were sitting on the wall? The question surprised her. She looked back at the wall, then at the lit windows of the hospital. I come here sometimes, she said, to sit near it. But, not go in. But, not go in. He turned this over. Did someone you love die here? The cold went through her differently when he said it. Not sharper, deeper. Yes, she said, my husband. Eli's face changed, not with pity which she had learned to dread from adults, but with something simpler and more useful recognition. I'm sorry, he said, and he said it the way children do when they genuinely mean it, without the practiced sound of a phrase rehearsed at someone's elbow. Thanks. They stood there in the cold for a moment. Then Eli said, I'll come in with you, if you come too. Gwen looked at him. A 9-year-old boy offering to walk her through a set of hospital doors she had not walked through in 14 months. She thought of a dozen reasons to decline. She thought of the sliding doors and the sound they made, the antiseptic smell she had been avoiding, the cardiac ward on the 3rd floor, where she had sat in a plastic chair, and been told words she could not make herself unhear. All right, she said. The doors opened and the warm air hit her, and with it the smell. She stopped walking. Her legs did not fail, but the rest of her went rigid for a second. Memories pressing from all directions like hands she had not given permission to touch her. Eli was beside her. He did not say anything. He simply kept walking at a pace she could match toward the cafeteria sign, slow enough that she did not feel pulled. She started moving again. The cafeteria was quiet this late. A few nurses on break, a man asleep in a corner chair with a paper coffee cup going cold beside him. Gwen bought Eli a hot chocolate and a grilled cheese sandwich and a muffin from the glass case. He held the mug with both hands, the way people hold things that are almost too good to trust. They sat at a corner table. Eli put the item from his chest pocket down on the table between them. It was a hockey card. Battered at the edges, soft with handling, the surface dulled from years of being touched. The player on it was from the early 90s. Gwen didn't know the name. The card looked like it had been folded and unfolded so many times the crease down the middle had become part of it. Is that your father's? She asked. He gave it to me to hold when he goes to appointments, Eli said. He says if I'm holding it, he doesn't have to worry about it, and if he's not worrying about the card, he can concentrate on getting better. Gwen looked at the card, the logic of it. A father giving his child something precious, not to comfort the child but to give the child a task, a purpose, a reason to be careful. She thought of Paul, who had made her laugh at the worst moments, who had held her hand during the 2 miscarriages before this last pregnancy, and said, we'll keep trying, we have time, we have so much time. They had not had time. Is he sick often? She asked. Sometimes, his heart does something. Eli took a careful sip of the hot chocolate, not like a heart attack, but the rhythm goes wrong. They usually fix it and he comes home the same day. A pause, but this time they kept him. Gwen kept her voice steady. Do you have family nearby, someone who can come be with you? My aunt lives in Dartmouth but she doesn't drive. And my mom. He stopped, repositioned the hockey card slightly on the table. My mom's not around. Gwen did not ask for more. She had learned in years of foundation work that children offered exactly as much as they could carry to offer, and the worst thing you could do was reach past that line. Do the nurses know you're here? That you're on your own? The lady at the desk knows. She said she'd come get me when there was news. He looked at his sandwich, then back at the card. She said it might be a while. They sat together. Eli ate slowly, not because he was uncertain of the food, but with the focused attention of someone making something last. He finished half the sandwich and looked at it as though negotiating. You can have the rest, Gwen said. I got it for you. He picked it back up. My dad says you should always eat slow in a hospital cafeteria so it tastes like a real meal. Your father sounds like he knows his way around difficult situations. Eli smiled. Not the easy smile of a child without worry, but the pride of a child who genuinely admires someone. He's pretty good at it. He says the trick is to find one thing that's okay and hold on to it. He touched the edge of the hockey card. That's why the card. Gwen looked at it. Find one thing that's okay and hold on to it. For 14 months she had held on to nothing. She had kept Paul's mug, his coat, his glasses, but she had held on to them as evidence, not as anchors, as proof that something real had existed, not as a reason to keep standing. Can I ask you something? Eli said. Yes. The hospital, you've been coming here but not going in, for a long time? She thought about deflecting, but children always knew when adults were being careful with the truth. 14 months, she said. That's a long time to sit outside. I know. He looked at her with the directness she was coming to expect from him. "What are you waiting for?" She had been asked this question by her sister, her therapist, her deputy at the foundation who had gently suggested she might benefit from speaking to someone. She had deflected each time. She did not deflect now. "I don't know," she said. "I think I was waiting until it didn't feel like the place where I lost him. Until it felt like the place where I do my work again." "Does it feel different now?" Eli asked. Gwen looked around the cafeteria, the sleeping man in the corner, the nurses with their coffee, the tired light overhead. She looked at Eli with his hockey card and his insufficient hoodie and his mug of hot chocolate. "A little," she said. "Yes." Eli nodded. He finished the second half of the sandwich and moved on to the muffin. Outside the cafeteria windows the hallway was quiet. A porter walking past with a cart, a family standing in a tight cluster looking at something on a phone. "Was he nice?" Eli asked. "Your husband?" The question moved through her like the first breath after being underwater. "He was the nicest person I knew," she said. "He used to bring coffee to the hospital reception staff when he came to drop things off for the foundation. He knew all of their names." Eli considered this. Then some of his nice is probably still here. Gwen looked at him. "My grandma used to say that kind people leave some of themselves in places where they were good to others," Eli said, matter of fact as though this were established science. "Like it goes into the walls." She said that's why some buildings feel right and some don't. Gwen pressed her fingers flat against the edge of the cafeteria table. The laminate surface was cool and solid, and she was grateful for something physical to hold on to. She thought of Paul standing at the reception desk in the lobby, learning the names of people who had no reason to expect him to know them. She thought of him driving across the city on her behalf, donation check on the passenger seat, calling her to say "I love you, don't worry, I'll just be 5 minutes." She thought of all the times he had been in this building doing good things, small things, unrecorded things that no gala would ever commemorate. He had been here, he had been kind here. Maybe she had not been sitting outside, because she was afraid of losing him in there. Maybe she had been sitting outside because she was afraid of finding him. She excused herself for a few minutes and made 2 phone calls, one to the charge nurse on Eli's father's ward, identifying herself, asking about Mark Turcotte's status without invoking her position to override anything, only to understand the situation. The news was cautious but not terrible. Stable, monitored, specialist review confirmed for morning. She returned to the table. "He's stable," she said. "They're watching him tonight and a cardiologist is coming in the morning." Eli's whole body changed. The careful tension he had been holding in his shoulders released in one small movement, like a coat sliding off a hook. He picked up the hockey card and held it in both hands. "Okay," he said quietly, "okay." He called his aunt after that. Gwen sat quietly across the table and did not listen, which was the only decent thing to do. The conversation was short. Carol Turcotte, from what Gwen could tell, was someone who moved toward things rather than away from them. She would be there within the hour. When Eli put the phone down, something had shifted in him. He was still a 9-year-old boy in a hospital cafeteria, still wearing a hoodie with a hole at the elbow, but he was no longer carrying everything by himself. "She's coming," he said. "Good." He smoothed the muffin wrapper flat with his thumb, looked at it, then looked at her. "I'm glad you were sitting on the wall," he said. "So am I." He picked up the hockey card and turned it over in his hands, looking at the back then the front. Then he slid it across the table toward her. Gwen looked at it. "Ellie. Just hold it for a bit," he said. "My dad says it helps to have something to hold." She looked at the card for a long moment, the edges worn to softness, the crease down the middle that had become part of its character. A thing that had passed through hard times and was still itself. She picked it up back. It was lighter than she expected. Most things that carried that much meaning were heavier in the hand. They sat together until Eli's aunt arrived, a solid, warm-voiced woman who came through the cafeteria door already pulling Eli into a hug before she had even set her bag down. She thanked Gwen with the practical efficiency of someone who understood that some situations called for action first and conversation later. Before Gwen left, Eli came to her and held out his hand, palm up. She placed the hockey card in it. He shook his head. "Keep it for tonight. Ellie, your father needs. He needs me to not worry," he said, "and I'm not worried anymore." He folded her fingers around the card with both his hands, the way you close a box around something fragile. "Give it back tomorrow." She drove home with the hockey card on the passenger seat beside her. The city was quiet. The harbor lights moved on the water. She sat in her car in the driveway for a long time, then she went inside. She had not turned on the kitchen light in months. She navigated by habit and the glow from the street. But tonight she turned it on. The yellow light fell across Paul's mug on the counter, his coat on the hook. She stood and looked at them and did not look away. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table. She drank the whole cup. Then she went upstairs and opened the door to the room they had started to clear for the baby, which had become, in the 14 months since, a room she did not enter. The door at the end of the hallway she walked past without looking. She opened it. The window was still shut from last October. She reached across the little table they had found at a market in the Annapolis Valley, and undid the latch and pushed the window open 2 inches. Cold night air came in. The smell of the harbor, Halifax in November, salt and cold and something underneath it, the smell of things still alive below the surface of winter. She left the window open and went to bed. In the morning she was at the hospital by 7:30. She stopped at the cafeteria, bought 2 hot chocolates, one for Eli and one because Paul had always told her she didn't drink enough warm things in winter, and took the elevator to the cardiac ward. Mark Turcotte was sitting up when she arrived. He was a lean man, mid-40s, with Eli's same watchful brown eyes, an ivy line in his left arm, and the careful stillness of someone who had spent enough time in hospitals to know not to waste energy on unnecessary movement. Eli was beside him in the visitor's chair, still in the hoodie, the hockey card back in his father's hand. Mark looked at her with the measured attention of a man who was not going to accept anything at face value, but also was not going to be unkind about it. "You're the woman from last night," he said. "Gwen Mackenzie." She set one of the hot chocolates on the tray table. "I'm sorry to intrude. I wanted to make sure you were both doing all right." "We are." He looked at the cup. "Thank you." She had made 3 calls that morning before arriving. She would not pretend otherwise. She had called the department head she knew, not to demand anything but to ensure the specialist review was on for this morning, and that Mark's case had not been deprioritized in the overnight shuffle. It had not been, but she had made sure. That was the use of her position, and she was not going to be coy about it. "The cardiologist is coming at 9, she said. "The ward nurse confirmed this morning." Mark looked at her for a long moment. "Ellie said you were important at the hospital." "I chair the foundation board." He nodded slowly. "Then you already knew that." "I wanted to make sure." Something in him eased, not entirely but enough to accept it. Before she left the ward, she stopped at the nurse's station and arranged for the hospital social worker to meet with Mark. She knew the woman personally, trusted her. To make sure there was a support plan in place for Eli and his father before discharge. Not charity delivered from a distance. An actual conversation between actual people. Then she went down to the foundation office on the 2nd floor, the office she had not been to in person in 9 months, and sat at the desk that still had her name on the door. Her assistant looked at her with barely concealed surprise, and the professional courtesy not to remark on it. "I need to draft something," Gwen said. "The Paul Mackenzie Family Support Fund. It's been in my head for over a year. I want it to exist by end of fiscal." She had thought about creating it for 14 months. A fund in Paul's name, not for equipment or research but for families, for parents who needed a cab to get to the hospital, for children who sat in waiting rooms without enough to eat, for the people who fell through the space between illness and insurance and community, and just needed someone to make one phone call on their behalf. Paul would have done it himself if he had thought of it. He would have done it quietly, without the gala, without his name on the wall. But she was the one still here. And she was the one who now knew what a 9-year-old boy in a thin hoodie looked like sitting alone on a hospital wall in November. She was also now the one who knew what it felt like to walk through those doors anyway. She wrote the proposal that morning and sent it before lunch. Before she left the hospital, she stopped by the cardiac ward one last time. Mark was in with the cardiologist. Eli was in the hallway with a tablet his aunt had brought, the hockey card tucked into his hoodie pocket. He looked up. "My dad's talking to the doctor." "I know, I won't stay long." She reached into her coat pocket and took out a card, her foundation card with her direct line. She held it out. "If you or your father ever need anything while he's here or after, call that number." Eli took it. He read both sides, the way children do when they want to understand the full weight of something. Then he looked up. "Are you going to be okay?" She considered him for a moment. A 9-year-old boy in a hospital hallway asking a 47-year-old woman if she was going to be okay. Asking because he genuinely wanted to know. She thought of Paul's mug, which she had washed that morning for the first time. She thought of the window at the end of the hallway upstairs, which she had left open 2 inches to let the harbor air in, and intended to leave that way. She thought of the proposal sitting in her sent folder, and the sound of her own voice saying I want it to exist. "Yes," she said, "I think so." "Good," said Eli Turcotte, and went back to his tablet with the easy certainty of a child who had accepted the answer and moved on. Gwen walked to the elevator. She pressed the button and waited. When the doors opened, she stepped inside and looked forward. Sometimes the only way back to yourself is through a door you have been circling for over a year. Sometimes the person who holds it open is 9 years old, sitting in the cold in a hoodie with a hole at the elbow, holding a hockey card that belongs to his father, waiting for the world to be reliable again. Sometimes the kindest thing anyone can do is simply notice that you are crying, not to fix it, not to take it from you, but to make sure you know you are not doing it alone. The elevator doors closed. The hospital hummed around her, full of everything she had been afraid to feel, and everything Paul had left in the walls when he had been kind here. All those Thursdays, all those ordinary years. She was still in it. That, she decided, was enough to begin.